Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All goes Sri Prabhupada. So I'll offer brief prayers and we can continue from there. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chekshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatharini जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. I'm sorry I could not do live this morning. That's why I'm sharing this recording with all of you. So we're in the 5th canto and the 26th chapter, and today we're reading from verse 1 to 9. So a brief context, we're hearing the pastime of Rishabdev Maharaj. The whole 5th canto started with description of the lineage or descendants of Prayavata Maharaj. So we heard about Prayavata Maharaj in chapter 1 and Agnidhara Maharaj in chapter 2, and then his elder son Nabi in chapter 3, and then from 4th chapter we are hearing about Rishabdev, who was the son of King Nabi. We heard Rishabdev, who is none other than Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we also heard in the last chapter how Rishabdev gave wonderful teachings to his sons, 100 sons, headed by Bharat Maharaj, about the value and importance of human life and the necessity of utilizing human life with a divine, transcendental austerity, tapo divyam, to achieve the purpose of life, which is to engage in pure devotion service towards Supreme Lord Krishna. And then he also instructed them in the principles of detachment and understanding that sense gratification is futile and it only leads to misery. And then after that, after all these instructions, he was he left the place. And then in this chapter, we are hearing how Rishabdev was conducting his life like an avaduta. Is an expansion of what we heard in the last chapter. But now Sukadeva Goswami is answering a question from Parishit Maharaj in this chapter. The question Parishit Maharaj is asking is, in the last chapter, Parishit Maharaj heard from Sukadeva Goswami that Rishabdev has all the 6 opulences, not 6 opulences, like mystic opulences, Ashtasiddhis. So, which are usually come either by performing Ashtanga Yoga or for an advanced devotee also they can come, because Krishna can bestow those opulences, mystic opulences, to a devotee also without having to do Ashtanga Yoga process. So he has those mystic opulences, but he did not utilize them, he did not exhibit them. So Parishit Maharaj is asking in text number 1 now. The question he's asking is, actually, in his case, he got all these mystic opulences naturally by his bhakti also. So then, if for a devotee, if some opulence comes, including mystic opulences, they will not cause any distress because they're not bewildered by that opulence. They just utilize that opulence in Krishna service only. So why Rishabdev neglected them, did not use them like that? Parishit Maharaj asked the question in the first verse. So Prabhupada is writing in the purport that devotee is not concerned are distressed or satisfied with material opulences. Whether I have too much opulences, too much material opulence, or very little material opulence, devotee is not so distressed. But what is he concerned with? Devotee is concerned with how to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how to please Krishna. So if by the grace of Krishna, a devotee achieves extraordinary opulence, material opulence, he utilizes that again in the service of Krishna. So it is not disturbed by such opulence, like that Prabhupada is mentioning in purport. Now, to this question of Parishit Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami is answering now. What does he say in the second verse? He says, what you spoke is correct. Yeah, for a devotee, even material opulences come, they will not disturb him. So, however, he's giving an analogy. If a hunter captures some cunning animals, then Hunter does not put faith in them that they're going to stay there nicely. They listen to him like that. Hunter will be very careful and watchful that at any point they might run away like that. So if he is negligent, the animals will run away, the animals that he caught. Similarly, those who are advanced in spiritual lives, they do not put faith in the mind, he says. Indeed, they always remain vigilant and watch the mind's actions, what the mind is thinking, what the mind is acting, in which way. They'll be careful. So they'll not neglect the mind, like that is describing here. Meaning, they do not put any faith in the mind, basically. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes how yagna dana tapasa, yagna sacrifice, dana charity, tapasa austerity are essential at any point in life. Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 18.5. That's what Prabhupada is quoting in the purport. And then he says, renouncing doesn't mean that we renounce Sankirtan yagna. Sankirtan yagna should be performed all the time. And then similarly, yoga system for control of senses or mind should be followed all the time. So Rishabdev has is showing severe types of tapasya could be performed to set an example for other Ashtanga yogis Prabhupada describes in the purport. Now text number 3. Sukadeva Goswami is elaborating on this answer that those advanced in spiritual life do not put faith in the mind, he said in the last verse, right? So expanding that. In the next few verses, we'll hear about the nature of the mind now. So he says, the mind is by nature very restless and one should not make friends with it. So we hear from Bhagavad Gita also. When the mind is controlled, it's a friend. When the mind is uncontrolled or restless, then it's not a friend. It's an enemy. So that's what being described. When the mind is uncontrolled and restless, don't make it a friend. Don't place faith in it. If you place full faith in such restless mind, it may cheat us at any moment. Like that, Sukadeva Goswami is describing. And he gives 2 examples to illustrate that point, how mind can cheat somebody. So he describes example of Lord Shiva getting bewildered by Mohini Murti. This happened this is elaborately described in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where churning of the milk ocean pastime is described. So the intent is to share a lesson with us. Lord Shiva himself is an exalted personality. So in this pastime, Supreme Lord himself comes as Mohini Murti to teach a lesson for us. If an exalted personality like Lord Shiva can get disturbed by the mind, what to speak about us like that? So we have to be very cautious, careful. Now another example Sukadeva Goswami gives is about Saubhari Muni. Saubhari Muni was such a great Muni. He had so much power that he could go inside the water and do tapasya also. So, but even though why he went into the water? So that nothing can distract him, nothing can disturb his tapasya like that. But in the water is described, this also pastime is described, I believe, in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that even though he went inside the water, he saw 2 fish mating with each other. And that time, by seeing that, he became bewildered. And he came out of the water and went to marry some princesses. And then he spent time with them, family life with them for a long time. And then finally realized and went back to perfect his life. But initially, so the reason he's giving this example of Sabari Muni and Lord Shiva here is that mind is restless. And when it's uncontrolled, we should not put faith in the mind, like that is describing. So Prabhupada starts the purport saying the first business of anyone trying to advance in spiritual life is to control the mind and senses. So we should be careful with our mind and senses. That means, and Prabhupada also writes, to get out of the false struggle for existence and become happy in the material world. That means trying to be happy in the material world, like that feeling by sense gratification. We should control our mind and senses and be detached from material conditions. So we should never neglect austerities and penances and we should perform them. So that's how Prabhupada writing. So basically, Prabhupada also further elaborates, in any ashram we are there, Grahastha ashram, Vanapastha ashram, Sannyasa ashram or Brahmacharya ashram, we should be very careful with associating with opposite gender. So Prabhupada is describing that is one who is forbidden to sit in a solitary place, that means with nobody else, with another woman, even if the woman happens to be mother, sister, or daughter, doesn't matter. Then he's also describing that uh, how do we save ourselves from allurement of opposite gender? How do we save that is by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra without any offenses. That way, we can purify our propensity, our inclinations for attraction towards opposite gender, like that. Prabhupada is writing as a solution in the purport. So, but if you're not strict in chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we may at any time fall victim to women, Prabhupada writes. So basically, we need to understand mind is different from us, the spirit soul. And when thoughts come in mind or some propositions come in mind, we understand that is not my thought. That is a thought proposed by mind. So when we see mind as a separate entity, then we can process those thoughts and do what is needed for them by understanding, is this thought or is this proposal mind is making, is it favorable for my Krishna consciousness or is unfavorable for my Krishna consciousness? Those are principles of Sharanagati, right? Anukulasya Sankalpa, Pratikulasya Varjanam. So when we are able to see that thoughts arising from a mind are separate, then we can make this evaluation. Is this favorable? Is it unfavorable? If it's favorable, I accept it. If it's unfavorable, I reject it, like that. So that is the important principle. Instead of, if we identify with our own mind, then we'll think, I want to do it, like that. But it may be just mind's proposal. So we evaluate with our intelligence and according to scriptures, Guru Sal Shastra, what we heard, and then act or not based on what is suitable for our bhakti. And in the text 4, Sukadeva Goswami is further describing the nature of the mind with another analogy. He describes a unchaste woman. A husband and wife are there. If the wife is unchaste, she might have other relationship with a paramour, and then sometimes that relationship goes so far that husband is violently killed by that paramour also. That is the example is giving. Now, how does he connect with the mind here? He says if the yogi gives his mind a chance and he does not restrain it, it doesn't control it, the mind will give the facilities to enemies like lust, anger, greed, like that. And those lust, anger, greed will kill the yogi. So, in the comparing to the analogy, so unchaste woman is the mind here in this analogy. And then the paramour or the enemy are the lust, anger, and greed, like that. So how if unchaste woman pairs up with the paramour, paramour will kill the husband, right? Similarly, if restless mind, uncontrolled mind, if because it pairs up with impurities like lust, anger, greed, that lust, anger, greed and can kill our progress in bhakti. That means they can stunt the progress in bhakti. They can affect with our practice of spirituality. Of course, bhakti can never be destroyed. Whatever little we do, it's to our eternal credit. But it can give us propensities to go away from bhakti, go away from devotee association. We cannot stay with any devotees anymore because we made that, because lust and anger and greed, impurities are overtaken us, like that. That's why we should be very careful with uncontrolled mind is being described. And Prabhupada writes in the purport how women needs to be given protection. When they're small, father gives protection. When they're married, husband gives protection. And later on in the life, when husband takes up vanaprastha or even sannyasa, then wife, the woman need to be protected by their elder sons, like that. So if we do not give protection to women like that, then with that independence, there's every possibility that they may mix unrestrictedly with men and they may get spoiled, Prabhupada writes. So, that means as a yogi or a practitioner of bhakti, we should be recognize mind's propositions and we should control our mind. And how do we control the mind? In Upadeshamrita, or the nectar of instruction, Sri Rupa Goswami gives this instruction for us. Sri Prabhupada, it is purport, shares that the way we can control the mind is to by meditating on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, number one. Number two, by meditating on our services to Krishna. How to do the how can I do this service? How can I do this service more better? Like that. Always better service. Like that, that's how mind can be engaged in services of Krishna. Then mind is not idle to think about this, that, like that. So we should keep the mind busy with the services of Krishna and literature of Krishna, scriptures. So that way we can contemplate on the how to apply the message of Krishna in our own lives, like that. That way, mind can be controlled. And the last fifth verse, or not last verse, fifth verse for today, Sukadeva Goswami is describing mind is the root cause of lust, anger, pride, greed, lamentation, illusion, and fear. These constitute bondage to fruitive activity. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, best way to control his mind is by Krishna consciousness. He describes Savai Mana Krishna Padaravinda Yo. This is a reference to ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Ambarish Maharaj pastime is described, where Ambarish Maharaj engaged all his senses, including the mind, in service of Krishna. So that is the way we can control our mind. And we should not be trust our mind, uncontrolled mind, like that is describing. Now, text number 6. So until now, we heard about why Rishabdev Maharaj did not utilize mystic appliances, because he wants to be careful. Like if you give some enjoyment of the mystic appliances to the mind will become uncontrolled, and then it will be difficult for spiritual life. So he's very careful like that. So that is the nature of the mind we heard in the last 4 verses from Sukadeva Goswami. Now, Rishabdev is describing further behavior of Rishabdev Maharaj as a Avaduta. What did he do? He dressed like Avaduta, he spoke like Avaduta, he acted as if he's dull and materially bound. He was trying to teach yogis how to leave the body, it seems. That is the purpose of Rishabdev acting like this. And then, yeah, and then he gave up his pastimes of Lord Rishabdev in this material world is described. If following in the footsteps of Lord Rishabdev, one can give up his subtle body, there is no chance that one will accept a material body again. So how do we ensure that we don't get a material body again? By adopting spiritual conception, by understanding that I am a part and parcel of Krishna, I am a servant of Krishna, and engage in my life like that. Then that's the way. At the end of the life, we can get a spiritual body. Prabhupada writing in the purport. And text number 7, Sukadeva Goswami is describing, actually Lord Rishabdev had no material body, but due to Yogamaya or the internal potency, he considered his body material. Therefore, he played like an ordinary human being. And he gave the mentality of identifying with the body is described. So he was traveling everywhere and was practicing with hair disheveled. He didn't decorate himself. He didn't clean himself like that. That's how he was going everywhere. So while he was going everywhere like that, finally one day, there was a forest fire because of bamboos striking each other due to the wind. And because of that forest fire, wild forest fire, which was blown by the wind, he also entered that forest fire is described. And then, and the body, the material body, so-called material body, was burned to ashes. This is a bewildering thing. On one side, we are hearing Lord Rishabdev body is transcendental, spiritual. On the side is burning to ashes also. How can a spiritual body burn to ashes? So this how spiritual Supreme Lord bewilders everybody. So that everybody thinks, see, he also died. That means he's a human being like me only. He had some powers, that's all. To give the opportunity for others to say like that, Supreme Lord performs pastimes like this. Interestingly, when Rishabdev left his body on that in that forest in this way, all the other animals that were consumed in the fire of the forest, they were all liberated from material engagement, it seems, because of Rishabdev's presence in that fire, in that forest. So the last verse for today, there was a king by name King Konka. He was the king of, his name is not given. His name is given as King of Konka, Venka and Kutaka, like that. So that is the places Rishabdev wandered as Avaduta. So this king heard about the activities of Rishabdev. Oh, his name is given as Arhat. Prabhupada writes, later they are called as Jain, like that. So King Arhat heard about Rishabdev activities, how he is performing like Avaduta, and he started imitating his activities, it seems. Finally, his followers introduced a new religious system, which is atheistic, which is against the Vedic principles, just following the external activities of King Rishabdev. But they didn't follow the principles that Rishabdev taught in the last chapter. Instead, they followed the external activities, and that is now called as a Jain Dharma, it seems. So, in one sense, Jainism started from Rishabdev, but perverted, misunderstood by King Arhat. They adopted only external practices, not the principles that are given Vedic teachings that King Rishabdev taught, like that. That's why it's called an atheistic system. Prabhupada writes in purport, people in this age will be more inclined to accept anyone as Supreme Lord and accept any religious system according to opposed to Vedic principles. So, because they are not following Vedic principles, they think they are the Supreme Lord themselves. And that's how atheism is spreading in the world, Prabhupada is writing. So the main things we learned today in this section are, number one, Rishabdev did not utilize his mystic opulences, even though he had the privilege of using them, so that he was careful not to get distracted because of them. And we heard the nature of the mind from Sukadeva Goswami. If somebody has a restless mind, that can create a lot of damage in terms of progress in spiritual life. So it's important to control the mind by engaging our mind and senses in the service of Krishna. That's what we heard today. And then, of course, we heard we should follow great people's. Whenever there's a difference between teachings and personal example, a great person, then we should take the teachings. For example, this is explained in the context of Lord Krishna himself. We should follow Lord Krishna's teachings if sometimes Krishna's actions don't match the teaching, like that. That's another principle we can learn from this section. We'll pause here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kupasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna.